Most people who grew up with a toxic parent have the same fantasy. The perfect argument. The exact right words that finally make them understand. The moment where everything clicks. Where they look at you and actually see what they've done. Most of us spend years chasing that moment. This is the story of a man who finally stopped chasing it, and what happened when he did. I'm 40 years old. Both of my parents are narcissists, though my father was mostly absent. It's been my mother, really, for most of my life. The constant presence, the constant damage. We've done no contact twice. Once for 2 years after she hijacked my university graduation, turned it into something about her, the way she always did. Then again for 3 years after things between her and my wife reached a point I couldn't come back from. I broke the silence last December. My father had been diagnosed with cancer. I flew back to my home country to see him. He refused to see me. Said he didn't want me to see him like that. So I was left with her. We spent the day together, the two of us. And here's the strange part. It was almost nice. We talked about everything. News, food, old stories. Nothing personal, nothing loaded. I was almost starting to relax. Then, after dinner, she put down her fork and said, "We need to talk about what happened 3 years ago." Here's what I want to tell you about what happened next, because this is the part that matters. Before that visit, I had made a decision. I had repeated something to myself like a rule, like a mantra. I told myself, if she had dementia, if she were genuinely ill and couldn't reason properly, I wouldn't argue with her. There would be no point. So I decided to apply that same logic to my mother. She is sick, not with dementia, but with something. A pattern of thinking so deep and so rigid that no argument, no matter how clear, no matter how patient, has ever once reached her. I've tried for decades. It has never worked, not once. So why keep trying? When she started in, I said, calmly, without anger, "I'm not going back to the past. What happened, happened. Let's focus on the present and on supporting Dad with his recovery." She didn't accept that. Of course she didn't. She started pulling out the old files. The things she knows get under my skin. My wife didn't offer her coffee during a visit once. I seated her at the wrong table at our wedding. Grievances from years ago, recycled, sharpened, deployed like weapons. And I had an answer for every single one. I always do. That's the trap, isn't it? When you're smart and you've been hurt, you become very good at defending yourself. But defending yourself with her has never worked. She doesn't want resolution. She wants the argument. The argument is the point. I could feel the sweat running down my back. Every part of me wanted to fire back, to correct her, to win, the way I'd been trying to win since I was a teenager. Instead, I thought, Alzheimer's. There's no point. She's ill. And I repeated my line. I'm not going back to the past. After about 10 minutes, she stopped. Just like that. Changed the subject entirely. Something she'd seen on the news. Like a switch had been flipped. I couldn't believe it. 20 minutes later, she tried again. It was getting late. My defenses were low and she could feel it. She always could. She pushed harder this time, more provocative, going for the things she knew cut deepest. I'm not discussing things from the past. Same line, no variation, no engagement. And she stopped again. Then her whole demeanor shifted. She looked at me and said, "And I'm still not sure I fully believe this happened. Thank you so much for coming. I'm so happy you're back." I called my wife that night. I told her it had been transformational, that for the first time in my entire life, I had walked away from a conversation with my mother without feeling destroyed, without feeling like I'd been turned inside out and wrung dry. I felt liberated. I felt like I had made a choice, not just in that room, but about who I was going to be. Like I had looked at a pattern that had controlled me for 40 years and simply declined to follow it. That feeling was unlike anything I had experienced before. So here it is. The technique, if you want to call it that. Treat them like someone with dementia. Not out of cruelty, out of clarity. Because the goal was never really the argument. The goal was always your own peace. Don't explain yourself. Don't justify. Don't defend. Don't engage. Hold your line. Repeat it. Let them exhaust themselves against it. They will. Eventually, they always do. And you'll walk away, maybe for the first time, feeling like yourself. If you've ever walked out of a phone call or a family dinner feeling like you just survived something, this one was for you. The moment you stop trying to win an argument that was never meant to be won.
Sometimes the worst things happen in ordinary places. A gas station, a highway, a dark parking lot in a country that isn't yours. This is one of those stories. We were on a long drive, a family road trip, if you could call it that, crossing through 2 foreign countries to visit a relative. My parents, my younger sisters, and me. Hours on the highway, late into the night. At some point, my father pulled into a gas station to refuel. Everyone stepped out to stretch, to use the restroom, normal stuff, the kind of stop you forget about on any other trip. But this one, I will never forget. My sisters and I came back to the car. My mother wasn't back yet. We waited. 5 minutes, 10, still nothing. My father turned to me and told me to go find her. I checked the restroom, she wasn't there. I checked the store, nothing. I walked around outside, looked in every direction. I came back to the car and told him I couldn't find her. That's when he grabbed me. Not gently. He grabbed my arm, hard, swearing at me, and shoved me back into the car. My heart was already pounding. I'd seen that look before. I knew what it meant. Then he started the engine. He didn't drive away. Not exactly. Instead, he moved the car, away from where we had been parked, behind the trees, between the station buildings. Hidden, out of sight. And then we waited. A few minutes later, my mother walked out of the store. She was holding a coffee and a piece of cake. She had bought them for him, so he could stay awake during the drive. That's why she'd taken longer. She was inside, doing something kind for him. She looked around for the car. It wasn't where she left it. I wanted to get out. I reached for the door. My father looked at me and said, quietly, which was almost worse than shouting, that if I stepped out of that car, he would kill me. I believe him when he says things like that. I have seen what he is capable of. I have seen him beat my mother until I thought she wouldn't get up. I have seen him pour boiling water on her. I have watched him lose control and point a gun at us. There is one person in this world I am truly afraid of, and it is him. If I were standing at the edge of a cliff and he reached out his hand, I would jump. So I stayed in the car, and my mother started to run. She ran from one side of the station to the other. She doesn't speak the language of that country. She didn't have her phone. She had no way to call anyone, no way to ask for help, no way to understand what was happening. All she knew was that her family's car was gone. She must have thought we left her. My father turned to us and said, "Watch." So we watched. We watched her search. We watched her confusion turn into something worse, into panic, into fear. We watched her run back and forth, looking for a car that was 20 meters away, hidden just out of sight. And then she stopped running. She sat down on the sidewalk, and she started to cry. I watched my mother sit on the ground, in a foreign country, in the middle of the night, crying because she believed her family had abandoned her. I cried too, silently, so he wouldn't see. I don't know how long we sat there. It felt like a long time. Eventually, my father said, "Go get her." I ran. I didn't walk, I ran. I threw my arms around her before she could even stand up. I told her everything, what had happened, where the car was, why we hadn't come. She told me about the coffee, the cake, how she'd just been inside the whole time. She thought she was doing something nice for him. She got in the car. They argued. We turned around and drove home. My father left the house that night. That was 2 days ago. I am 18 years old. I haven't slept since. Every time I close my eyes, I see her running. I see her sitting on that sidewalk. I see her face. I keep thinking, what if he had actually driven away? What would have happened to her? Alone, no phone, no language, no money, in a country she doesn't know, in the middle of the night. And then I think about something else, something harder to sit with. I stayed in the car. I know why. I know the fear that keeps you frozen. I've lived with it my whole life. But knowing why doesn't make the guilt any easier to carry. I think this has broken something in me. Or maybe it finally broke something that had been cracking for a long time. I'm not sure where to go from here. I just needed someone to know this happened. If you grew up in a house where you learned to make yourself small to stay safe, this one was for you. You're not alone. And what you lived through was not normal, no matter how normal it was made to seem.
My dad is 52. His girlfriend is 22. My age exactly. I want to be clear about something before I say anything else. I wasn't planning to make it a big deal. People date who they date, but when it's your own father and the woman sitting across from you at the dinner table was born the same year you were, something shifts inside you that you can't really explain. It just sits wrong. Quietly, persistently wrong. So I told him. Privately. Just the two of us. I wasn't accusatory. I wasn't dramatic. I told him it made me uncomfortable, that it felt like a strange kind of erasure, like the version of him who raised me had been quietly replaced by someone I didn't recognize. I told him it felt like a betrayal, and then I waited for him to respond like a father. Instead, he gave her my phone number. I woke up to messages from a stranger, a 22-year-old woman I had never spoken to in my life, telling me I was disrespectful, attacking my character, making comments about my body, calling my mother names. Degrading, deliberate, personal. My father was standing in the kitchen while she sent them. I could hear him on the phone, laughing, cussing, cheering her on like it was a sport. That was the moment something broke, not just between us, something inside me. But let me back up, because this didn't start with a text message. My dad has always been difficult. Growing up, I watched him be controlling and abusive toward my mother, not once in a dramatic way that made the neighbors call, the slow, grinding kind, the kind that makes a woman spend 12 years calculating the safest moment to leave. She finally did, when I was 12. I don't blame her. I never did. But that fracture never fully healed. And what was left of our family rearranged itself around his moods ever since. Lately, something had shifted in him. He'd fallen out with friends he'd known for over 30 years. Men who had been at his side for decades, gone, one by one, after arguments that always seemed to start with something small. He'd become reactive in a way that felt new, or maybe just more visible, less filtered, like whatever had always been underneath was finally done pretending. When I told him I was uncomfortable with his relationship, he didn't just get upset, he exploded. Over text first. A wall of words that had nothing to do with what I'd actually said and everything to do with his ego. I read it and set my phone face down and tried to sleep. I woke up to the sound of my bedroom door being unscrewed from its hinges. He removed my door. Didn't knock. Didn't say a word. Just stood there in the hallway with a screwdriver, taking apart the one boundary I had left in that house. No explanation. No conversation. Just removal. The next day I left to clear my head. When I came back, the locks had been changed. This was my legal residence. My name was on nothing, but I lived there, which, under the law, means something. I stood on the porch of the house I'd come home to and could not get in. I called the police. They came. They knocked. They rang the bell. He didn't answer. They told me that since it was my legal residence, whatever I needed to do to get inside was technically within my rights. But they couldn't force him to open the door without escalating things further, so I left again. I had nowhere to go. I sat in my car and called my sister, who was inside. She didn't answer, didn't text back. I'm certain he warned her not to. I called the police a second time. Still nothing. The third time, something shifted, and I finally got back inside. I knew when I walked through that door that it wasn't going to be peaceful. I knew it. But when you have nowhere else to go, you go home, even when home is the thing you're afraid of. That's when he called her. He put her on speaker, right there in the kitchen. And while I stood in the same house that police had now visited 3 times in one day, my father laughed and cussed and told his 22-year-old girlfriend to go ahead and send me whatever she wanted. She did. I won't repeat all of it. But she went after my body, my character, my mother. Things you only say when someone hands you permission, when someone tells you the target is standing still and won't fight back. My father was the one who handed her that permission. It stopped feeling like a family argument. It started feeling like something else, like retaliation, like I was being punished, not just for what I said, but for daring to say it at all. Around 2 a.m, while the house was quiet, I packed a suitcase. I hung a sheet over the place where my door used to be. I moved slowly and didn't turn on the lights, and then I walked out. I haven't gone back. Before I blocked him, one last message came through. He said I was the one who started this, that I had brought his girlfriend into it by talking about her to him, her own boyfriend, in the first place, that they were just defending themselves. I read it twice. I put my phone down, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Not rage, not sadness, but a kind of grief. The specific grief of realizing that the version of your father you were still hoping existed simply doesn't. I used to think, not my dad. My dad would never. I don't think that anymore. And somehow, that loss, that quiet, definitive loss of who I believed he was, hurts more than anything he actually did. You already know the verdict. Some things don't need a vote.
There's a specific kind of grief that has no good name. It's not the grief of losing someone to illness, or distance, or death. It's the grief of watching someone you love become someone you don't recognize, slowly, incrementally, in ways that are easy to dismiss at first and impossible to ignore later. It's the grief of sharing a bed with a stranger who is wearing your wife's face. I've been married for 6 years. We have a 4-year-old daughter, and I'm only now beginning to accept what I should have seen coming long ago. When I met her, she was brilliant. Genuinely, arrestingly brilliant. Curious about everything, warm with everyone, the kind of person who made a room feel more alive just by being in it. I fell in love with her mind before anything else. The way she thought, the way she questioned things. I didn't know then that the same quality that drew me to her would eventually be turned against us. It started small. A few years into our marriage, she discovered certain corners of the internet, conspiracy spaces, fringe communities, comment sections that fed on outrage and rewarded the most extreme takes. At first, it seemed like a phase, a rabbit hole she'd climb out of. I'd come home to find her deep in some thread about something I had never heard of. and she'd try to explain it, and I'd half listen, and life would move on, but she didn't climb out. She went deeper. The hours she spent online multiplied. The jobs got shorter. She'd take something on, last a few months, then quit or get fired and come home more certain than ever that the problem was external. The world, the system, the people who didn't understand. I became the sole provider without it ever being discussed. I became the primary parent without it ever being decided. It just happened. The way a lot of things happen in a marriage, gradually, then all at once. What was harder to name was the racism. It started as something I told myself was just an intense dislike of a particular celebrity. The kind of irrational fixation that social media practically manufactures. But it didn't stay there. Over time, it became something uglier. Comments I had to brace myself for, opinions she'd state as facts, a worldview that had calcified around a core of genuine contempt for people who looked a certain way, particularly women of color. Friends left, family pulled back. Her own parents still called, but they called to check on me and our daughter, not on her. She was losing her world. And I don't think she even noticed. I begged her how to try therapy. Eventually, she agreed. For a few months, I saw her again. Glimpses of the woman I'd married. Present, reflective, willing to question herself. I held on to that so tightly. I told myself this was it. This was the turn. She quit, and everything went back. By the time I posted on Reddit, I was running on empty. I framed it as a question. Is there any saving this marriage? But looking back, I think I already knew the answer. I just needed someone to say it out loud for me. What I didn't know yet was that the situation was worse than I'd understood. The comments pointed me somewhere I hadn't expected. A community called QAnon casualties. People whose partners, parents, siblings had disappeared into the same kind of radicalized online spaces. I read their stories for hours. The patterns were identical. The disconnection, the escalating extremism, the financial chaos, the way the person inside seemed to recede further every time you reached for them. Someone suggested I check our joint accounts. I had avoided doing this. I'm not sure why. Some combination of trust and fear, and not wanting to find what I found. She had been withdrawing large amounts of money for months. From an account we had opened together early in our marriage, earmarked first for family vacations, and later, when our daughter was born, quietly designated in our minds as a future college fund. She had drained it. When I confronted her, she denied it. When I pushed, she explained, and her explanation, delivered with complete sincerity, was this. She had donated significant sums to political organizations she believed would create better schools and keep children safe. She had spent thousands more on designer clothing and accessories she had hidden in the house. And then there was the other thing. She had been scammed. Someone she'd met through a royal gossip forum, a community devoted to hating a particular member of the British royal family, had told her they'd hired a private investigator. This person would send her articles, claim the PI had uncovered damning information, then ask for more money to keep the investigation going. She had sent it, repeatedly. She told me this as though it were completely reasonable. She saw nothing wrong with any of it. I sat across from her and tried to find the woman I had married. I couldn't. I told her I was filing for divorce. She laughed. Then she realized I wasn't joking. Then she exploded. I won't describe every detail of what happened next. What matters is that a glass she threw hit me in the head. I left the house bleeding. My neighbor called the police. By the time they arrived, she had destroyed the kitchen. She was arrested. I was granted a domestic violence restraining order and temporary custody of our daughter. My wife is now living with a former co-worker, facing a criminal charge, and navigating divorce proceedings that my lawyer believes I will win outright. Her family has reached out, not to defend her, but to offer me their support. This is not how I imagined any of this ending. I want to be honest about that. There is no version of this outcome that feels like a victory. There is only a little girl who deserves better, and a father who is finally, belatedly, doing what it takes to give her that. The woman I married is still somewhere inside all of this. I have to believe that. Not for my sake, but because erasing her entirely would erase 6 years of something that was once real. But I can't save her. I've learned that now. The only people I can still save are the ones under my roof. Some people don't come back from where she went. And the worst part is, she doesn't know she's lost.
15 years is a long time to know someone, long enough to know their coffee order, their sleeping position, the specific way they laugh when something actually catches them off guard, long enough to believe you know what you have, long enough to be completely blindsided. My wife and I have been together 15 years, married for 10. In all that time, she's always had some form of physical outlet, like running, cycling, the gym. A year ago, she decided she wanted to get stronger, started lifting weights, made real progress, and about 4 months ago, she took on a personal trainer to help her push further. 3 sessions a week. She came home proud of herself, and I was proud of her too. Then this past weekend, she sat me down and told me she had developed an intense crush on him. I want to be fair to her for a moment because she was the one who brought it to me. She didn't have to do that. She said she knew crushes happen in long relationships. That wasn't the part that concerned her. What concerned her was that this one felt like more. She was seeking his attention constantly. At the gym and online, she'd started tagging him in all her posts, which I'd noticed, but written off as giving credit. She'd been wearing less and less to her sessions, changing at the gym so I wouldn't see. Then came the part that landed harder. The last few times we'd been intimate, she'd been fantasizing about him. When the guilt got to be too much, she stopped initiating entirely. 2 months of no sex, explained, finally, not by a new job in cold weather, but by this. And then the worst detail, a few days before she told me all this, she'd watched him laugh during a session with another woman, younger, closer to his age. And she'd gotten so jealous she had to leave the gym and cry in her car. She was quick to say he'd done nothing wrong, that he'd been professional throughout, that none of this was his fault. And from everything I could tell, she was right about that. What I didn't know yet was how wrong she'd been about everything else. The night after she told me, I laid out what needed to happen. She leaves the trainer, she leaves that gym, we go to couples counseling, non-negotiable. She didn't take it well. She argued that it was just a crush, that it would pass, that she was making real progress, and I was framing it as not caring about her health. When she realized I wasn't moving, she started bargaining. Like, what if she just stopped seeing the trainer but kept the gym? And if she started sleeping with me again, did we really need therapy? That's when I lost it. Tell me everything, I said. The messages, the outfits, everything. Now. She said fine. And walked upstairs, came back down, wearing something that, I'll be honest, had no business being worn to a gym in the middle of winter. I didn't comment. I asked to see her phone. She said she'd deleted the messages. When I asked why, she told me the truth. On Christmas Day, while I was downstairs cooking for her family, she had sent him a topless photo. I sat with that for a moment. Then, as a kind of afterthought, since she was already confessing, she mentioned she'd kissed another man in the first year of our relationship. I already knew about that. Her friend had told me years ago. The fact that she was using it now as currency, as distraction, told me everything I needed to know about how this conversation was being managed. I asked her why him and not me. She said it wasn't really about him. It was about her, about feeling like she'd missed out. She'd gone from a school boyfriend straight into her early 20s, had 1 year single, and then met me. She said she was starting to feel like she'd never had her youth, that she was enjoying the attention of other men more and more, especially younger ones. And then she said something that had been nagging at me since the very beginning of all this, like since the night she first confessed. It's just a fantasy, she'd said then, unless you want me to do something, with a nervous laugh, like she was testing a door to see if it was unlocked. I asked her directly when she first told me, was she hoping I'd give her permission? She said she genuinely thought I wouldn't mind because I'm not a jealous person. Something about that answer made me want to go for a drive. I went to the gym, I found the trainer and told him I wasn't there for trouble. Once that I understood my wife had been bothering him. He wasn't pleased to be approached, which was fair, but when I told him her name, he said he'd known something like this was coming. He hadn't trained her since Christmas. He'd let her go after she'd sent photos. plural, not the one she'd told me about. She'd sent 12 pictures over 3 months. One was fully naked. When he'd asked her to stop, she'd told him she was just documenting her progress. He showed me the messages she'd sent after he cut contact. She told him they'd been arguing constantly. She told him I was always out drinking with my friends, leaving her alone. Neither of those things have ever been true. In mid-December, she told him I'd moved out, that we were divorcing. On Christmas Day, with the photo she sent while I was downstairs cooking, she wrote, "First Christmas alone," and just last week, she'd messaged him to say I was already seeing someone else. I thanked him, asked him to send me everything, and drove home. She was already gone by the time I got back. Left a note on the table, just the one word. Sorry, she went to a friend's house. We've been texting. There's a marriage counselor booked for next week, though I've already decided I won't be going. I want to be clear about something because I've thought about it a lot since all this came out. I'm not even that upset about the photos or the flirting or the outfit. People do things they shouldn't. That much I can process. What I cannot get past is this. She was texting him from our home, crafting a version of our marriage that made me the villain. She told him I drank, that I argued, that I left her alone, that I'd moved out, that I was already with someone else. All of it invented, all of it designed to make him feel sorry for her, to make him want to rescue her from a life she was describing to him while living an entirely different one. With me, I was downstairs, her family was at our table, and she was upstairs sending him a nude, like captioning it like she was already free. I don't think you come back from that, not because of what she did, but because of who she was willing to make me into while she was doing it. Divorce proceedings start this week. Life can turn upside down in a week. I never really believed that before. I do now.
I need to start by saying that my daughter is perfect. She is healthy and whole and beyond anything I could have prepared myself for, and every time I look at her, I feel something I don't have words for yet. She arrived almost 2 weeks ago now, and the circumstance of her arrival, the ones I'm about to describe, are something I am still trying to make sense of. My wife is struggling with having missed the birth. That's its own grief, the kind that sits alongside joy and doesn't cancel it out but doesn't disappear either. We're navigating it together. We're okay. But there's something else that keeps crossing my mind, something I can't put down, something that, on the surface, sounds almost absurd, until you sit with it long enough to understand why it isn't. I was 38 weeks pregnant, almost there, the kind of pregnant where every day feels both endless and like it could be the day. My wife had stepped out for the afternoon to help her brother. A short trip, an hour and a half away, something we were both completely fine with. Neither of us saw what was coming. Nobody did. My friend Alice offered to come spend the day with me so I wouldn't be alone. I was grateful. We watched movies, we hung out, we talked. It was genuinely nice. The comfortable kind of day that feels easy and unhurried, the kind you don't fully appreciate until it's over. I had been uncomfortable for a while by that point. Late pregnancy is like that. There's a constant low hum of discomfort that becomes your baseline, and you stop reading it as information because it's just always there. So when the feeling started shifting, I didn't immediately understand what I was feeling. I had been uncomfortable for so long that I didn't recognize the difference. And then at some point we did realize this was the real thing. I called my wife. We considered waiting for her to get back, running the numbers, trying to figure out if we had time. But things started moving fast. Much faster than either of us expected. And I asked Alice to drive me to the hospital. She said yes. She got her car, her husband's car, and we left. We didn't make it. I had my daughter in the passenger seat on the way to the hospital. I'll say that again because I think it needs a moment to land. In a moving car, on the side of the road. With my friend Alice, who is not a medical professional, who came over to watch movies and keep me company, who said yes when I asked her to drive me and could not have known what that yes was going to mean. We are both fine. My daughter is fine. There were some complications on my end that have since resolved. But we made it through, and she is here, and she is perfect. Alice was extraordinary. She stayed calm. She was there. She did everything right in a situation that nobody could have prepared for, that nobody would choose, that arrived without warning and demanded everything from her in a matter of minutes. I have thought about that a lot in the days since. what she did for me, what it must have felt like to be her in that moment. 2 days after it happened, I sent her a message. I thanked her again for everything she had done. I told her, lightly but sincerely, to please send me a bill for having the car cleaned. I meant it genuinely. I wanted to make it right. I wanted her to know that I wasn't going to just disappear now that the crisis was over and pretend the car situation hadn't happened. She didn't reply for a while, and then eventually she liked the message. That was it. I messaged her a few more times after that, checking in, trying to reach her. Each time, nothing. The silence on the other end had a particular quality to it. Not the absence of someone who was busy, but the presence of someone who was choosing not to respond. And then her husband messaged me. He told me not to contact her anymore. He congratulated me on the baby. And then he said, his words, "Thanks for ruining his car." I want to be clear about something. I understand, completely, that what happened to that car was significant. A baby being born is not a clean event. The car needed serious cleaning at minimum, possibly more than that. I was always going to pay for it, fully, without question, whatever the cost. That was never in doubt for me. I said so in my first message. I meant it, but that message from her husband cracked something open that I have been sitting with ever since. Because there are two things happening here, and I think they need to be separated. There is the car, which is a real, concrete, fixable thing. Expensive, possibly, but fixable. And I am going to fix it. That part is not complicated. And then there is Alice. Alice, who came over because she didn't want me to be alone. Alice, who drove me when I asked without hesitating. Alice, who was there for the most overwhelming, unplanned, chaotic moment of my life and held it together when I needed her to. Alice, who has now gone completely silent. Who has stopped replying to my messages. Who has, by the time I finished writing this, deleted and blocked me entirely. And I don't know what to do with that. I've been trying to understand it from her side. What I asked of her that day, what life asked of her through me, was enormous. She didn't sign up for it. She came over to watch movies. She ended up in a delivery room she didn't choose, on the side of a road with no warning and no preparation and no way to opt out once things started moving. That is traumatic. I think I knew that intellectually, but sitting with it these past 2 weeks, I've started to feel the full weight of it. She was scared. She had to be. And whatever she experienced in those moments in that car, whatever she saw, whatever she felt, whatever she had to carry, that belongs to her. It's hers to process in whatever way she needs to. Maybe she needs space. Maybe she needs silence. Maybe she's working through something that she doesn't have words for yet, and the messages from me, even well-intentioned ones, and my needs, are landing in a place she's not ready to receive them. I understand that, I'm trying to, but I also won't pretend that the husband's message didn't sting, because buried under the congratulations was an anger that reduced everything. Alice's fear, my emergency, my daughter's arrival, all of it, down to a damaged car. And I don't think that's the whole story. I don't think that's even most of the story. I've been going back over the messages I sent, trying to see them from the outside. My first message, the one with the lighthearted comment about sending me a bill, I've wondered since whether the tone was wrong, whether what felt to me like warmth and ease came across as dismissiveness. Like I was making a small joke out of something that, for her, was anything but small. I didn't intend it that way, but intention isn't the only thing that matters. The messages after that were serious, worried, genuinely reaching out, but by that point the silence had already set in. I reached out again recently, a real message this time. An apology, a genuine one, for everything I put them through. The car and the trauma, both. An offer to pay for everything, whatever it costs, however they want to handle it. An offer to organize it myself if that's easier. Anything to make it right. She's blocked me now. My priority is my family, my daughter, my wife, who's grieving a birth she wasn't there for while also holding a baby she already loves completely. That is where my attention belongs, and that is where it is. But this keeps surfacing. The way things ended with Alice. The silence where a friendship used to be. The feeling of having caused damage that I didn't intend and can't seem to fix no matter how hard I try. I am so grateful for what she did. I will say that as many times as it needs to be said, to anyone who will listen, for as long as it matters.
She showed up for me in the most unexpected, most demanding way possible. She didn't have to. She did it anyway. I hope she's okay. I genuinely do. And I hope that one day when she's ready, if she's ever ready, there's something left of what we had that can be picked back up. But I can't force that. I'm starting to understand that. Some things you can pay for and fix, and some things you just have to leave alone and hope.
Jake and I have been together for 4 years. I'm 27. He's 27. We have a good relationship. A real one. The kind that's been tested and held. The kind where you've seen each other at your worst and chosen to stay anyway. I love him. I want to be upfront about that, because everything I'm about to say is going to sound like I don't. About 9 months ago, I met Stephanie through work. We hit it off immediately, the way you sometimes do with a person and can't fully explain why. She was funny and warm and easy to be around, and within a few weeks, she had become one of my closest friends. Looking back now, I wonder if something in me recognized something about her before the rest of me caught up. But at the time, I just thought, I really like this person. I'm glad she's in my life. A couple of months after we met, I invited her over to cook together. We were both bringing something to a work potluck, and we decided to make it a whole evening. A bottle of wine, music, cooking something complicated together. It was a good night. One of those easy, comfortable nights that feel like you've known someone much longer than you actually have. And then Jake came home. I introduced them. He sat with us for a while. They talked. I watched. And something happened in that room that I have been trying to make sense of ever since. I don't know how to describe it without sounding irrational. I'm going to try anyway. They are not similar people in terms of interest or background. They don't like the same things. On paper, they shouldn't have had that much to talk about. But they have the same sense of humor, the same energy, the same rhythm in a conversation. Watching them talk for the first time was like watching two puzzle pieces slot together, the kind of fit that looks almost too clean, the kind that makes you do a double take. I noticed it. And then I told myself I was imagining it. And then I kept noticing it, because Stephanie has become more integrated into our lives over the past 9 months. She's part of our shared friend group now. We see her regularly, and the more I see her around Jake, the more I see things I cannot stop seeing. He blushes around her. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone else would clock. But I know his face. I have looked at that face for 4 years, and he blushes around her in a way I have never seen him do around anyone else. When she says something funny, he does this laugh. Hoarse, unguarded, completely unperformed. I had never heard that laugh before she came into our lives. I didn't even know it existed. When we're out somewhere and he sees something, a restaurant she'd like, an article she'd find interesting, he says I should tell her about it. Not I should show you this or this reminded me of us. This reminded me of Stephanie. Almost involuntarily, like the thought just arrives. He remembers everything about her, her favorite brand of vodka. Things she mentioned once in passing in a group conversation that I had already forgotten. He files them away without seeming to try, and the way he talks to her, it's gentle. It's the tone he uses with his mother, patient and soft and genuinely attentive, like whatever she's saying is worth slowing down for. None of this is inappropriate. I need to keep saying that because it's important. He doesn't message her privately. He doesn't follow her on social media. He doesn't seek her out one-on-one. He has never, not once, done anything that would give me a concrete reason to be standing here feeling the way I feel. But in group settings, they gravitate toward each other. Not aggressively, not obviously, but consistently. Like magnets that aren't quite touching but are always, quietly, aware of where the other one is in a room. He goes out of his way to explain things to her. In detail. With care. The way you explain something to a person whose understanding genuinely matters to you. And she asks him questions. The right questions. The kind of questions that get him to open up in a way that I, after 4 years, still sometimes have to explicitly ask for. I have to tell him directly, I want you to be emotional right now. I want you to let me in. And he does, because he loves me and he tries. But with her, he just does it. Naturally. Without being asked. Without even seeming to notice. For his last birthday, I was stuck. I knew I wanted to do something meaningful, something that would show him I really knew him, but I was drawing a blank. So I asked Stephanie. I figured she'd have some ideas. She picked the perfect thing, immediately, without hesitation. Something I never would have thought of, something that was so specifically him that I don't even fully understand how she landed on it so quickly. When he opened it, his face changed. He looked at me like he had never felt so understood. He said he couldn't believe I had thought of it. But I didn't think of it. She did. and I smiled and said it was nothing, and something very quiet inside me broke a little. I know how this sounds. I know that from the outside, someone could look at everything I've described and tell me I'm inventing a problem. That chemistry between friends is normal, that Jake is allowed to click with people, that Stephanie hasn't done anything wrong, that I am catastrophizing something that exists almost entirely in my own head. I know all of that. I have told it to myself constantly for months, but I also know what I have seen. And I know the difference between my boyfriend being friendly with someone and my boyfriend being lit up by someone in a way I have never seen before. I know what it looks like when a person makes someone come alive. I am not imagining it. I just cannot prove it. And that might be the worst part. Because at least if something had happened, at least if there was something concrete, I would know what to do with it. I would have a problem I could actually name. Instead, I have this. Vibes. Feelings. The particular weight of a laugh I've never heard before. What it's doing to me is not pretty. I catch myself getting short with Jake when he doesn't immediately light up the way he does around her. When he's quiet, when he doesn't respond to something I say with that same unguarded energy, I feel it like a small injury. Even though I know, rationally, I know that relationships don't operate at that level of constant electricity all the time. That comfort and familiarity look different from new connection. That what I have with him is built and real and deep in a way that 9 months of friendship isn't. I know all of that, and I still feel the injury. When Stephanie asks me how a date night went, or how things are with Jake, I feel something strange tighten in me, like I don't want to share it. Like my relationship is something I need to protect from her, which makes no sense because she hasn't done anything to threaten it. She's been a good friend, she's warm and genuine, and she cares about me. I like her. I genuinely like her. And I think that's what makes this so hard. If she were terrible, this would be easy. If Jake were inappropriate, this would be painful but straightforward. But they're both just good. They're both just good people who happen to have a natural connection that I stumbled into the middle of, and there's no one to be angry at and nothing to fix and no conversation I can have that won't make me sound unhinged. I can't bring this up to Jake. What would I even say? That he laughs differently around her. That he remembers her favorite vodka. That the birthday gift she picked made him look at me like I finally understood him, and I had to stand there and accept credit for it. He would look at me like I was losing my mind. And maybe I am. I can't bring it up to Stephanie either. She has done nothing wrong. She is my friend. So I'm here instead on a throwaway account typing this out to strangers because I have to put it somewhere. I love Jake. That is not a complicated sentence for me. I love him and I want to be with him, and I am not interested in walking away from 4 years because of something I can't even fully articulate. But I also can't keep carrying this the way I've been carrying it. It's getting heavier. It's changing the way I show up in my relationship and in my friendship, and neither of them deserve that. And honestly, neither do I. I just need to know how to let it go. How to see what I see and feel what I feel and still choose every day not to let it consume everything else. I don't have an answer yet, but I needed someone to know that this is real, even if nothing has happened, even if nothing ever happens. It's real, and it's exhausting.
6 months ago, my father died, not slowly, not after a long illness, with time to say the things you always meant to say, not with any of the preparation that people talk about when death is something you can see coming from a distance. He died unexpectedly. The kind of death that arrives without warning and leaves you standing in a room, phone in your hand, trying to understand a sentence that doesn't make sense no matter how many times you read it. I was 30 years old. I had never had to think about death in a personal way before that moment. And then suddenly, it was the only thing I could think about. A few weeks later, a number appeared in my bank account that I had never seen before. $500,000, my father's entire life. Decades of work, of saving, of going without, converted into a figure on a screen. I didn't know what to feel about it. I still don't, entirely. It was life-changing money. It was also money I would have given back without a second thought. I had never had more than $10,000 in savings at any point in my life. To understand what happened next, you need to understand where I came from financially. I started working at 15, not because I wanted to, because I had to. When I finished my degree, moving back home wasn't a realistic option, so I moved straight into renting and never stopped. Every dollar I earned had somewhere to go. Rent, food, bills, transport. I wasn't reckless with money. I just never had enough breathing room to actually save any meaningful amount. My plan was always the same: get through university, get a good job, and then I'd start building something. I was finally at that stage of life when my father died. My partner and I had been together for nearly 5 years. She was still studying, a degree that had extended longer than originally planned after she changed direction 2 years in. She was working part-time, earning far less than me, and I understood that completely. I had been in a similar position not long before. You do what you have to do to get through. When we moved in together 3 years ago and she told me she couldn't cover half the rent, I didn't hesitate. I took on 70%. The apartments we chose were always the cheapest we could find. Small one-bedroom places, nothing extravagant, because property in Australia is genuinely brutal and we were doing what we could. I covered the larger share because I was earning more and she was earning less, and that seemed like the logical, fair thing to do. It wasn't just rent. Then, over 5 years, I paid more on holidays we took together. I covered more of our food, our bills, our entertainment. There were times she said she was short and I offered to help, and there were times she said she couldn't afford something, and I stepped in without being asked. I never kept score. I never wanted money to be a source of tension between us. I loved her. That's what you do for someone you're genuinely building a life with. My plan was always the same, support us both while she finished studying, and once she graduated and started full-time work, about 2 years away, we'd rebalance everything, split things evenly, she'd have more financial stability, I'd finally be able to save properly, and we'd move forward together from a more equal footing. It felt fair. It felt like patience, not sacrifice. When the inheritance came through, we started talking seriously about buying a house. I was willing to put most of the money into the deposit, willing to carry the largest share of the mortgage for another couple of years until she was earning properly. It was the same logic I had always used. The same patience, except now the stakes were significantly higher because this wasn't just extra income I was contributing. This was my father's money, the only thing he left behind. We went through the whole process together, found a place, prepared the application. I was ready to sign. And then, the day before we were about to submit everything, she said she actually had $50,000 in savings. Should we mention that in the application? She said she was a little embarrassed to bring it up. I remember just looking at her for a moment. I asked how long she'd had it. Since before we met, she told me. Money she had been saving since she was a teenager, living at home with her parents, before she had ever had to pay rent or bills or any of the costs that I had been managing since I was barely an adult. She had been able to save because those expenses simply hadn't existed for her yet. And once we moved in together, once those costs did exist, she had kept saving what she could while I covered the majority of everything else. The $50,000 had been there the entire time. Every holiday I paid for, every month I covered 70% of the rent, every grocery run, every bill, every time she said she couldn't afford something, and I quietly adjusted my own finances to make it work. Through all of it, she had $50,000 sitting in an account that I didn't know existed. To put that in perspective, $50,000 a few years ago was more money than I had ever had in my life. At the time, I was covering most of our living costs. I had almost nothing saved. She had $50,000. I want to be clear about something. I was not angry about the amount. That's not what hurt. I understood why she hadn't mentioned it when we first started dating. You don't open a new relationship with your bank balance. I understood that she had every right to her own money, her own financial independence, her own sense of security. I even understood, from a rational standpoint, that holding onto savings while in a relationship isn't inherently wrong. What I couldn't get past was the pattern. She hadn't simply stayed quiet, she had said the words, out loud, to my face, I can't afford this. Not once or twice, many times, across years, while I reorganized my own finances around a version of her situation that wasn't accurate. She had let me operate on false information, and because of that, I had made decisions. Real, financial, life-affecting decisions, based on a picture that wasn't true. And she had been ready, one day before we signed a mortgage application, to let me put my dead father's money into a house without saying a single word about it. That is the part I keep coming back to, not the $50,000. The silence right up until the last possible moment. When I thought about it more, I started remembering other things. The small lies over the years, the ones I had laughed off, found more strange than concerning. Why would you even lie about something like that? I used to say it almost affectionately, as if it was just a quirk, an odd habit, nothing worth taking seriously. Now I was seeing those moments differently, not as isolated oddities, but as a pattern I had chosen, every single time, not to examine too closely. We are a de facto couple under Australian law. That carries the same legal and financial weight as marriage. We had talked about our future as something permanent, not a wedding, neither of us wanted that, but a life. A real, committed, long-term life together. I had believed in that completely. House hunting is paused now. I don't know if the relationship survives this. I know we need to talk properly, with honesty, with the kind of financial transparency we should have established years ago. If we stay together, things have to change. Real rules, real openness, possibly a formal cohabitation agreement. And if we don't, I'll probably buy somewhere smaller on my own. What I can't stop turning over in my mind is something very simple. For 5 years, I paid for the life we shared together, willingly, without resentment, because I loved her and I believed we were in it equally, just at different stages. And the whole time she watched, and she said nothing. I wonder now what else she's been watching.